Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're digging into something pretty unusual that happened recently over in New Jersey.
Yeah, this clash at an immigration detention facility. It involved members of Congress, the Newark mayor.
Exactly. And it didn't just end there. It's actually led to federal charges against a sitting Congresswoman, which is, well, quite rare.
Definitely not something you see every day. It's got layers, legal fights, different stories about what physically happened, big political undertone.
For sure. And to unpack it, we've looked at quite a few sources. News reports in the AP, Forbes, Fox News, NBC New York, CBS, WBGO.
Right, and also some commentary from groups like the National Immigrant Justice Center, NIJC. Plus, we even checked out a Reddit thread on our moderate politics to see some of the public discussion points.
So our aim here, as always, is to lay out the key facts and the different viewpoints based only on these sources we have.
Understand what happened, how people are seeing it differently, and, why it's become such a significant issue.
Okay, let's jump in. Where and when did this all go down?
So the date was May 9th, 2025. The place, Delaney Hall. It's an ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey.
ICE being Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Right. And Delaney Hall, according to the sources, it's a privately run place, pretty big capacity for about 1,000 detainees.
And who showed up that day?
Well, there was a group, including members of Congress. Representative LaMonica McIver was notably there, and Newark's mayor, Baraka.
And why were they visiting? Was it scheduled?
Doesn't sound like it was a casual pop-in.
Oh.
The sources point to a few reasons. For the Congress members, it was framed as official oversight.
Which is part of their job, right? Checking up on government facilities, especially those run by DHS, the Department of Homeland Security.
Exactly. And the sources say there were specific concerns about potentially inhumane conditions inside that facility driving this visit.
Okay. And the mayor. Same reason.
Similar but slightly different angle noted in the reports. Mayor Baraka apparently wanted to check if Delaney Hall was meeting city codes.
Ah, okay. Municipal compliance.
Yeah. And there's some context, too. The sources mentioned this facility had recently been reopened and expanded under the current Trump administration. So that likely increased scrutiny.
Got it. So they arrive, intending to do this oversight, check codes. What happened next?
Well, things got confrontational pretty fast. According to multiple reports, ICE officers there blocked Mayor Baraka from going inside.
Just stopped him at the door.
Seems like it. And then it escalated. The sources talk about his arrest, but there's a key detail mentioned, apparently supported by video footage.
What's that?
That he was actually arrested after he'd stepped away from the facility area, but then officers physically dragged him back into that space.
Wow. Okay, dragged back into the area to be arrested there. That's specific. And caught on video, potentially.
Reportedly, yes. Then, sources say, when the members of Congress tried to follow the mayor or get into the area where he was being held...
Let me guess, they were blocked too.
Yes, and apparently force was used. The sources again mentioned video footage reportedly showing ICE agents physically restraining and blocking the Congress members.
So, a physical confrontation involving lawmakers.
It appears so, and initially DHS put out a press release. The sources say it accused the members of Congress of storming the facility.
Storming, that's strong language. Was that disputed?
Oh yeah, immediately, especially given the legal arguments the members of Congress were making about their right to be there in the first place.
Okay, let's talk about the legal side. What gives a member of Congress the right to just walk into a federal detention center?
Well, the sources point to a specific law. It's in the appropriations legislation, Section 527.
And what does Section 527 say?
According to the reporting on it, it gives members of Congress a legal right to enter DHS facilities, places used to detain non-citizens specifically for oversight.
Okay, oversight. But do they need to schedule it? Give notice?
That's the crucial part highlighted in the sources. The law apparently says they can enter without prior notice.
Without notice.
Yeah.
So unannounced visits are legally protected for members themselves.
That's what the sources citing the law suggest. It seems the law even says funds can't be used to prevent a member from entering for oversight. Now, staff might need to give 24 hours notice, but the members themselves, apparently not.
But ICE and DHS must have had a different take, right? Since they blocked them.
They did. Their position, as reported, was to remind the lawmakers about ICE's own internal guidelines.
Which say?
Basically, that tours should be scheduled ahead of time, and visitors need to follow the facility's rules, procedures, and listen to the staff on site.
Ah, So there's the conflict. Does following facility rules mean you give up your no-notice entry right?
Exactly. That seems to be the core of the legal argument, based on the sources and the commentary, like in that Reddit thread. Some argue, okay, Congress has the right to visit, sure, but ICE sets the how. You can't just barge past security. That's not covered.
But groups like the NIJC, the Immigrant Justice Center you mentioned, they probably see it differently.
Very differently. They argue, according to the sources, that unannounced visits are absolutely vital for real oversight.
Why unannounced specifically?
Because scheduled tours can be, well, staged. You clean things up, you present the best face. Unannounced visits let lawmakers see things as they really are, talk to detainees directly perhaps, get an unfiltered perspective. They say it's necessary to counter the information that might come just from ICE or the private company running the place.
So they see it as the only way to get the true picture.
Pretty much. And this isn't a new idea. The sources say legal aid and monitoring groups have been pushing for this kind of access for years because of worries about transparency.
Which brings us to the why. Why is this level of oversight seen as so critical? What are the underlying concerns about these facilities?
Yeah, the sources provide quite a bit of context on that. It's not just about this one incident.
What kind of concerns are we talking about?
Well, groups like NIJC, cited in the reports, describe issues like abuse and neglect as well documented and, frankly, rampant in the detention system.
Yeah.
They talk about a lack of accountability, sort of shrouded in secrecy.
That sounds serious. Any specifics?
There are statistics mentioned about deaths in custody. Sources note 3 deaths in the first month of the current Trump administration, 9 total since January 20th, 2025.
And how does that compare?
Well, the sources also mentioned 26 deaths during the previous Biden administration, and there was a June 2024 report cited that found something really striking. 95% of documented deaths in ICE custody between 2017 and 2021 were likely preventable.
95% preventable. Wow. That really puts the focus on conditions and care, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Then there's the sheer scale and expansion of the system.
It's gotten bigger.
Massively, according to the sources. It's spread across over 40 states and territories. You've got private facilities like Delaney Hall, but also contracts with county jails, even Federal Bureau of Prisons facilities.
And the current administration has pushed this expansion.
Sources report, yes, the Trump administration has apparently made new deals, including some with private prison companies allegedly tied to cabinet officials. They've also reportedly expanded detention to Guantanamo Bay, restarted family detention, and looked into using military bases.
Okay, so a bigger system. Serious concerns about conditions.
Yeah.
What about funding?
That's another major point raised in the sources' concerns about overspending. Reports indicate ICE is holding nearly 50,000 people right now.
And how many did Congress actually fund beds for?
Around 41,500, so quite a gap. This has led to worries that DHS is spending money Congress hasn't actually appropriated for that level of detention.
Has DHS addressed this?
The sources mentioned DHS Secretary Kristi Noem reportedly acknowledged spending beyond the appropriated levels. Apparently, the hope was to get extra funds later through something called a reconciliation proposal.
So some see these oversight visits as crucial before more money or contracts get approved.
Right, precisely. Oversight visits like the one at Delaney Hall are seen by some cited in the sources as a key check before potentially locking in contracts that exceed what Congress initially funded.
And you mentioned secrecy earlier.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme in the sources. Allegations that ICE might coordinate with inspectors or clean things up right before a planned visit, hide negative findings, or resist implementing recommendations.
Which comes back to why those unannounced visits are seen as so important by critics.
Exactly. It's presented as a necessary tool to cut through potential obfuscation and see the reality on the ground.
Have other recent visits turned up problems?
Yes, the sources mentioned some examples. Senator Dick Durkin's staff reportedly visited facilities in Louisiana and found issues with treatment of vulnerable people, problems caused by dismantling internal DHS watchdogs, and maybe misuse of funds.
Anyone else?
House Homeland Security Chair Benny Thompson also reported issues. He mentioned getting conflicting stories about serious allegations, things like miscarriages, denial of basic hygiene items like toilet paper or menstrual products, and he described seeing young women detainees who were visibly scared, shaking and crying in fear of retaliation.
So the Delaney Hall visit wasn't happening in a vacuum. There was this whole backdrop of serious concerns.
Right. Deep, long-standing concerns. Plus this legal framework that, at least according to one interpretation, gives Congress the right to show up unannounced to investigate.
Which makes the clash and what came next even more significant. Let's talk about the charges against Representative McIver.
Okay, so about 11 days after the incident, on May 20th, the U.S. Attorney Alina Habba announced charges. Then a grand jury indicted Rep. McIver on June 10th.
And what are the specific charges?
She's facing 3 federal counts. The main accusation, according to the sources citing the prosecution, is that she forcibly impeded and interfered with federal officers during that May 9th event.
Forcibly impeded. What kind of penalties are we talking about?
The sources say 2 of the counts carry a maximum sentence of 8 years in prison each. The 3rd count carries up to 1 year.
8 years max on 2 counts. That's serious. Do the sources detail what actions led to these charges?
Yeah, the prosecution's claims, as reported, include allegations of assault. They mention specific actions like Rep. McIver putting her arms around the mayor during the struggle, allegedly slamming her forearm into one officer and grabbing another officer.
And what evidence is the prosecution pointing to?
Primarily, DHS body camera footage. They claim this footage shows Rep. McIver elbowing an ICE agent.
So, video evidence is central again.
Seems to be. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was quoted saying the charges came after a thorough review of video and a full investigation. And Deputy AG Todd Blanche made a statement about not tolerating assaults on federal law enforcement.
Interesting. Now, what happened with Mayor Baraka? He was arrested, too.
Right. But U.S. Attorney Habba announced they were dismissing the misdemeanor trespassing charge against him.
Dismissing it. Why?
She stated it was for the sake of moving forward, and she actually invited the mayor to come back for a scheduled tour of the facility with her.
Okay. So, charges for the Congresswoman, dismissed for the mayor. How did Representative McIver react to being charged?
She strongly pushed back. The sources quote her calling the charges purely political, a distortion, and basically an attempt to scare lawmakers away from doing their oversight jobs.
So she denies the allegations completely.
Yes. She maintains she was acting lawfully, doing her duty as a Congress member. She argues it was the ICE agents who created an unsafe situation, and even alleged she herself was assaulted during the incident. Her lawyer called the decision to prosecute spectacularly inappropriate.
And Mayor Baraka, what did he say after his charge was dropped?
He said he was glad his charge was dismissed, but he firmly stood by Representative McIver, said he expects her to be vindicated.
Did he accept the tour offer?
The sources mention he reiterated his commitment to advocating for humane treatment at the facility and making sure it follows city codes. He framed the whole thing more broadly as being about human rights, due process, the Fourth Amendment.
What about other political reactions mentioned in the sources?
Well, Rep. McIver's Democratic colleagues reportedly saw the prosecution as infringing on lawmakers' duties, maybe trying to silence opposition to immigration policies.
And that Reddit thread you mentioned, what kind of discussion was happening there?
A real mix, as you'd probably expect. Some commenters felt that if the video shows assault or obstruction, then charges are justified, officials aren't above the law.
Makes sense. What about other views?
Others suggested her actions might look different in context, maybe defensive in a chaotic situation or just part of the crowd dynamics. Some questioned if ICE was actually the one obstructing legal oversight.
That's a key point. Who is obstructing whom?
Exactly. And there was debate about whether her right to enter as a Congress member affects the charge of impeding officers. You know, if they were unlawfully blocking her, can she be charged for pushing back? Complex legal ground. And, of course, some commenters saw the charges as politically driven or maybe excessive compared to other situations.
So clearly, lots of different ways to interpret the same event, even with video involved.
Definitely. The sources show multiple conflicting viewpoints on the actions, the legality, and the motivations.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive on Delaney Hall, it's clear this is much more than just a scuffle, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really throws a spotlight on this inherent tension, between Congress's power to oversee things, how federal law enforcement acts on the ground, and the whole controversial system of immigration detention.
Yeah, you've got these big legal questions about access rights versus following rules. You have totally different stories about what happened physically, likely relying on interpreting video. And it's all wrapped up in very strong political feelings about immigration and who's accountable.
And the fact that a sitting member of Congress is facing federal charges for something that happened while they were trying to conduct oversight, that's really the standout, rare part of this.
So what does it all mean for you, the listener? Well, this forces us to think about that balance of power, right, between Congress and the executive agencies.
Yeah, like what are the limits? If a lawmaker has a right to be somewhere for oversight, how much resistance can they face? How much force can either side use in that moment? And who judges that?
It also makes you ask about accountability. What standards should we hold government officials to? And what standards for law enforcement when these kinds of clashes happen during oversight?
So maybe the final thought to leave you with, based on all this, is how do we actually resolve these conflicts? When you have a legal right, like congressional oversight access, meeting resistance, or different procedural rules on the ground.
Yeah, what's the best way to make sure places like detention centers are transparent and accountable while also keeping things secure and orderly? There are no easy answers here, but this incident at Delaney Hall, as laid out in our sources, certainly brings those tough questions right to the forefront.